Halfland, an ahistorical prehistory. The Battle of the Verwood. In the 132nd year of the Common Reckoning, Anticlea and her Amazons attacked the Skeldings, defeating them in battle, killing Gunlaf their king, and sacking and burning Great Hall. Loaded with booty, and secure in the belief that there were no forces in the vicinity that were sufficiently valiant or vigorous to oppose them, the Amazons then headed back toward the Gaptooth Mountains. The route they took ran through the Verwood, a heathland liberally studded with stands of trees. In the van of the host were dispersed some 200 mounted Amazons, surrounding and driving a herd of looted cattle, beef on the hoof, to be slaughtered and consumed on the journey. Behind them marched Anticlea, accompanied by 75 or so armoured Amazons, wielding great two-handed spears, and in the rear followed the unarmoured Amazon archers, some 200 in number, split into two companies. The Amazons had not the slightest suspicion that they were being observed from the trees. Odo Eartuft and his halfling army were lying in wait for them. Odo had divided his force into 4 contingents, each containing something in excess of 100 halflings. The first group, which Odo led in person, was made up of shield-bearing spear halflings. Odo concealed these in a clump of trees. The other 3 groups consisted of missile troops, armed with slings and bows. These were also hidden in patches of woodland, one group to Odo's right, the direction from which the Amazons were approaching, another group to his left, and the third group opposite to these, on the far side of the Amazons' expected line of march. The Amazon column marched carelessly on, past the waiting halflings, until the last group of Amazon archers had drawn level with the group of halflings on Odo's right, and then all 3 groups of halfling missile troops broke cover, stepped forward, and released a hail of arrows and slingshot onto the unsuspecting Amazons. The halfling attack on the Amazon rear was rather ineffective. Although the halflings had the advantage of surprise, much of their initial shooting went awry. Amazon casualties were remarkably few, and the Amazon archers were soon formed up into ranks, loosing clouds of arrows at the halflings in return, with significant effect. But it was a different story for the Amazon cavalry at the head of the army. Halfling missiles rained upon them from both flanks, causing chaos. Many Amazons died, and others fled in disarray back toward the rear. The remainder, badly shaken, fell back and regrouped in front of Anticlea and her spearwomen. Anticlea rapidly assessed the situation. Her reaction was decisive and aggressive. She ordered her reformed cavalry to charge through the confused herd of abandoned cattle before them, and into the halflings on the Amazon right. The Amazon archers had already largely disposed of the halflings who had attacked the back of the Amazon column. Anticlea ordered half of her archers to hold in place and finish the job. She then ordered the other company of Amazon archers forward to face off against the third group of halfling missile troops who, having run out of horsewomen to shoot at, were now advancing on her from the trees. Until this point, Anticlea had been unaware of Odo Eartuft and his band of spear halflings, but as the Amazon archers advanced, Odo and his troop charged out of the trees, heading toward the exposed left flank of the bowwomen. Anticlea responded, leading her spear Amazons charging into the spear halflings, and a confused melee ensued. As Anticlea and Odo locked horns in the centre of the battlefield, the Amazon cavalry was mauling the halflings to her right. The company of archers to her rear were out shooting the halflings in that area of the battlefield, and the archers she had moved forward now began loosing arrows at the halfling missile troops in front of them, with some success. Maybe the battle was tilting in Anticlea's favour. But the halflings had other ideas. The surviving halflings to the Amazon's rear managed to find their range. The halflings on the Amazon right retreated back into the trees where the Amazon cavalry could not follow, and the spear halflings in the centre were pushing the spear Amazons back and once more threatening the flank of the forward company of Amazon archers, who retreated. While this retreat may have saved the Amazon archers, it meant that the entire force of the spear halflings was concentrated on Anticlea and her spear Amazons. As the halflings pushed her back, Anticlea summoned the Amazon cavalry to her assistance, galloping across the battlefield. But the Amazon cavalry, who had so gallantly charged heavily armoured Skelding horsemen at the Battle of Great Hall, proved reluctant to do likewise when faced by a wall of spears wielded by doughty halflings. Instead, the Amazon cavalry recoiled and regrouped alongside the forward company of archers. This left Anticlea and her surviving spearwomen seriously outnumbered. But the spear halflings did not press home this advantage. They were exposed in the open, within bowshot of the Amazon archers, and still within charging distance of the Amazon cavalry. They headed back into the woods. Even as the spear halflings retreated, the halfling missile troops advanced. The forward Amazon archers manoeuvred into a position to deal with this, but a short, sharp exchange of arrows and slingshot drove them back again in disarray. And now Anticlea called up the archers from the rear, gathering all her remaining forces together. She looked eastwards, where on the horizon the snow-capped peaks of the Gaptooth Mountains glinted white in the sunlight. She then lowered her eyes to the heathland before her, studded with groups of trees, each concealing a host of hostile halflings, ready to rain red ruin on any Amazon who ventured within bowshot or slingcast. And she raised her spear above her head, shouted out her defiance, and charged toward the mountains she called home, toward her foes, and those around her charged, laughing, at her side. But the rest of her army did not follow her lead. The cavalry hesitated, and the bulk of the archers sought concealment in a convenient copse. Odo Eartuft stood and watched Anticlea and her followers rushing toward him. He called to his spear halflings that this was the moment of decision, and led them back out of the woods to meet her. The wave of the Amazon charge crashed into the advancing halflings. For a moment the halfling shield wall wavered, but it held, and the wave broke and rolled back, leaving the ground bestrewn with Amazon corpses. But Anticlea was not among them. She fled, following her bowwomen, seeking shelter with them in the trees. But no safety was to be had. The copse was swarming with halflings, and a brisk hand-to-hand combat ensued. Anticlea recovered her nerve and rallied her troops, throwing the halflings back. But the respite she thus won was only temporary. And now the Amazon cavalry spurred their horses to the gallop, hoping to break through the halfling lines and escape. Most of them perished in a hail of halfling arrows. Only a handful made it back to the mountains. Anticlea tried to follow them, to slip unobserved around the halfling flank, but she was observed and surrounded and butchered by keen halfling knives. The few remaining Amazon archers cowering in the copse had run out of arrows. They also tried to make a run for it, but Odo had come up with his spear halflings. The archer's end was at least quick, if not merciful. None of them escaped. Thus did the halflings break the might of Anticlea and her Amazons, and thus ended the Battle of the Verwood.